As someone who mains erudition, I've been so excited since Jade was announced. Now, she is finally here. You might have heard how Jade is a low-value pull since she will only excel in pure fiction. Is this false? Or maybe it has some truth to it. In this guide, there is a lot to cover. We will talk about Jade's different playstyles, go in depth when it comes to her gearing options, and finally talk about her viability as a solo carry, or as a sub-damage dealer. If you found the guide helpful, consider liking the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on up-to-date information. I always read everyone's comments, so feel free to ask questions that were not answered in the video. Without further ado. A senior manager in the IPC Strategic Investment Department, and one of the 10 Stonehearts, known for her cornerstone, Jade of Credit. A beautiful and elegant moneylender, she is skilled in deciphering the depths of people's minds, with a personal hobby called Jade exchange. She's willing to wait patiently for high-value acquisitions, and adept at extracting value from seemingly destitute clients. Jade is a 5-star quantum element character that specializes in buffing up an ally and dealing AoE damage, with most of it coming from her follow-up attacks. She follows the erudition path. At the start of battle, Jade immediately pushes her action forward by 50% through her A4 trace. This allows her to grant the buff of her skill to an ally or herself as early as possible. Whoever receives Jade's buff will become a debt collector. Whenever a debt collector attacks, they deal additional quantum damage equal to 25% of Jade's attack for each enemy hit. This means that if the debt collector hits 5 enemies at the same time, all targets will receive the additional quantum damage. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to bounce attacks such as Asta's skill, where only the main target will receive 1 instance of the additional quantum damage. Outside of this effect, the debt collector has their speed increased by 30, and will consume 2% of their maximum HP every time they attack. However, if Jade becomes the debt collector, these effects do not apply. Debt collector buff lasts for 3 turns, but the duration only decreases whenever Jade herself takes her turn. So unlike other speed buffs that easily run out due to the buffed character taking turns more frequently, Jade's speed buff technically lasts much longer. Of course, that is assuming you didn't build too much speed on Jade. Debt Collector works in tandem with Jade's talent. Whenever Jade or the Debt Collector attacks, they gain 1 charge for each enemy target hit. When Jade reaches 8 charges, she will automatically consume it, and launch a follow-up attack that deals quantum damage equal to 120% of Jade's attack to all enemies. This talent follows a set of rules. If Jade herself becomes the Debt Collector, this means that she will double the charge gains coming from her own attacks. Unfortunately, her follow-up attacks do not generate charges. If Jade gets crowd-controlled, she will still continue to accumulate stacks from the Debt Collector. So with Jade's talent, you can see that if the Debt Collector keeps hitting multiple enemies at a fast pace, Jade will benefit from it, and allow herself to spam follow-up attacks. Spamming follow-up attacks also helps Jade with her high energy cost, since each proc will provide 10 energy and extra 10 energy for each potential kill. When Jade's energy is full, she can use her ultimate to deal quantum damage equal to 240% of her attack to all enemies. Additionally, this will enhance Jade's follow-up attack by increasing its multiplier by 80%. This increase in multiplier is directly added to the 120% multiplier of Jade's follow-up attack, making Jade's enhanced follow-up attacks almost as strong as her ultimate. However, this enhancement can only take effect twice. Aside from that, all you need to know is that Jade needs to build up her stacks of pawned asset, up to a maximum of 50 stacks. Each stack will provide 2.4% critical damage through her talent, and 0.5% attack per stack coming from her A6 trace. Jade gains stacks of pawned asset through the following. 1. 15 stacks when she uses her technique before entering battle. 2. 1 stack whenever an enemy spawn. 3. 3 stacks whenever the Debt Collector takes their turn. And 4. 5 stacks whenever Jade performs a follow-up attack. This is Jade's light cone ranking. It is important to note that the calculations take into account Jade fighting 3 enemies at the same time. As expected, Jade's best light cone is her signature. Yet hope is priceless. It provides critical rate stats, which makes achieving a good balance with her high critical damage stats easier. It provides a massive damage boost to follow-up attacks, which is great because that is her main source of damage. Then, a powerful defense ignore for both her ultimate and follow-up attack. Next, today is a peaceful day. This light cone only wins slightly against Milky Way, and this is due to the fact that the calculations only take into account fighting against 3 enemies. This is a very strong and reliable light cone for Jade. Next is Milky Way. Milky Way has always been strong, assuming that you can keep up with its requirements. Jade has no problem using this light cone, considering you will most likely use her against content that requires you to fight waves of enemies such as pure fiction. Obviously, Milky Way ranks lower if you fail to meet its conditions. Next is Before Dawn. Even though it overkills Jade's critical damage stat, it still provides a huge damage boost to Jade's main damage source, which is her follow-up attacks. Increasing the frequency of Jade's ultimate could improve the performance of this light cone. After all, the issue with this light cone is that Jade cannot always activate the damage boost for the follow-ups. Jade's best free-to-play options are Cosmos Fel and Eternal Calculus. The reason why Eternal Calculus isn't that great is due to the fact that speed barely matters for Jade. Speeding up Jade just means she will rotate her skill faster, and using her skill is pretty much a dead turn for her. Ultimately, you'd want to maximize Jade's impact per action instead of speeding her up. However, if Jade could meet a certain speed breakpoint, and the extra action she gets results in an extra ultimate or follow-up attack, Eternal Calculus could climb slightly in the damage ranking. For the Cavern Relics, Jade can use Grand Duke or Genius set, with Grand Duke being slightly better than Genius by around 1 to 2%. Genius set, however, pulls ahead as soon as you start utilizing a defense shredder. For example, Pella's 40% defense shred alone will put Genius set ahead by 2 to 3%. Aim for a critical rate body and attack main stat for the boots. For the Planar set, there are a couple to choose from. Listing them down from best to worst. You can go for Sigonia, Duran, or Salsado. Note that the difference between sets at best is just 1 to 2%. While Sigonia is her best option, that is only assuming you can cap its effect. Considering that Jade can be played as a sub-damage dealer, it is possible that she can struggle to get the kills needed. This Planar set also puts some restriction on her, since not all content has waves of enemies to be killed. Duran is your next best option, especially if you are running Jade with another character that utilizes follow-up attacks. Otherwise, your most reliable option would be Salsado. It is worth mentioning that Salsado makes building up your critical rate a lot easier, so it can match Jade's very high critical damage stats. Aim for an attack rope and quantum damage for the sphere. Remember that Jade's talent generates charges when Jade attacks with her basic attack and ultimate. This means that by being able to use her ultimate more frequently, Jade could increase the frequency of her follow-up attacks. Not to mention, by using her ultimate more frequently, the amount of enhanced follow-up attacks would also increase. Factoring this into Jade's damage calculation, she could potentially increase her overall damage output by 7% by swapping out an attack rope for an energy rope. In turn-based games, damage breakpoints are also important, so Jade using an energy rope could be the deciding factor whether you get a clear, or at least save up some action values or cycles. At the same time, reducing Jade's attack would reduce the impact of each of her actions, and could potentially result from a one-action kill to require another action to get the kill. So please keep this in mind if you ever decide to go for an energy regeneration rope. Jade's first Eidolon increases the damage of her follow-up attacks by 32%. Additionally, the Debt Collector provides extra charges for Jade depending on the amount of enemy targets they hit. If 2 targets are hit, this Eidolon generates 1 additional charge. If 1 target is hit, this Eidolon generates 2 additional charges. The main purpose of this Eidolon is to ensure that the Debt Collector would generate a minimum of 3 charges. For example, if there's only the boss enemy remaining, Jade's attack would generate 1 charge, and the Debt Collector's attack would generate 3 charges. In 2 rotations, they will generate a total of 8 charges, which is the exact amount needed for Jade to launch a follow-up attack. The same thing would happen if Jade were to be the Debt Collector. This Eidolon makes it so that Jade's damage output does not plummet hard when against 1 or 2 targets. I would argue that if you really like Jade and plan to bring her to different types of game content, you should take this Eidolon over her signature light cone. Jade's second Eidolon provides 18% critical rate increase when Jade has 15 stacks of pawned asset. Jade's technique instantly provides 15 stacks, so this Eidolon is not particularly hard to trigger. People often undermine critical rate Eidolons, but not chasing for 18% critical rate means you could invest it into 36% critical damage instead. Jade's fourth Eidolon grants herself 12% defense ignore for 3 turns after using her ultimate. Remember that at a certain point of stacking defense reductions, 1% of defense ignore could start resulting in a direct 1% overall damage increase. This means that at a certain amount of defense reduction, this 12% defense ignore can result in a 12% overall damage increase. That is very strong. Jade's final Eidolon grants herself 20% quantum damage resistance penetration, and Debt Collector state when a Debt Collector exists in the field. This means that if Jade buffs another character or herself with her skill, it will trigger the Eidolon's effect. Unfortunately, if Jade puts the buff on herself, it won't double the effect of Debt Collector, so ideally, she should buff another character. The 20% damage resistance penetration is pretty straightforward. Depending on the enemy, this could be a 20 to 25% overall damage increase, and in some cases, a 33% damage increase. That is assuming there's no other damage resistance reduction coming from allies. Since there will be 2 Debt Collectors with this Eidolon, it will make stacking pawned assets faster. The cookie-cutter team for Jade is to have Jade herself, another damage dealer, a team-wide buffer, and sustain. Ideally, the second damage dealer can perform AoE attacks at high frequency for the best synergy. For example, erudition characters. There is also the fact that Jade being paired with another erudition means they can opt for the Azumo Planar set. Then, there is the solo carry setup for Jade, where she ideally puts her buff on a debuffer that can attack multiple enemies. Best example of this would be Pella, who can opt for a 2-turn ultimate rotation build. Jade's options increase if she has her first Eidolon unlocked. Now, let's talk about specific character synergy. The most notable synergy would be with Herta. All of Herta's attacks are true AoE, which means that whenever Herta attacks, it would grant the maximum amount of possible charges for Jade. This pairing performs best together in pure fiction. In fact, the background video is the Jade-Herta pair 0 cycling PF4. Next is Blade. Blade's attacks are all AoE with 2 blast types and 1 true AoE. Although the synergy revolves more specifically with Blade's talent. It is stated that whenever Blade sustains damage or consumes his HP, he will generate a charge. If Blade is the Debt Collector, it means that all of his attacks will additionally consume 2% of his max HP. Each time this HP reduction is triggered, it grants Blade an additional charge, which then allows him to spam his follow-up attack more frequently, and ultimately, helps Jade spam her follow-up attack as well. Speaking of wind element characters, there's also Black Swan. Black Swan's ultimate is a true AoE, and it can be spammed more frequently through the solitary healing light cone. Not to mention, her skill is blast type with defense reduction. So not only the blast AoE generates more charges for Jade, the defense reduction is also synergistic with Jade's ability to utilize the Genius set, and potentially her signature light cone. Next is Firefly. It might sound weird, but they can be a good pair. Firefly doesn't need someone like Bronya to act frequently. Her own sheer speed under complete combustion state is enough for herself to reach beyond 200 speed. Firefly's technique that procs on each wave entry can also provide Jade charges for her talent. There is also the fact that since speed boots provide 25 speed, you can opt for attack boots instead, since Jade will provide Firefly 30 speed through the Debt Collector buff. This exact synergy could be applied with Kafka and Acheron. Last but not the least, Bronya. Bronya provides extra actions to either Jade or the second damage dealer, which means they could launch more attacks. More attacks means more charges for Jade to help launch her follow-up attacks. What makes the synergy even stronger is the fact that Jade can provide the second damage dealer with 30 speed. This means that the second damage dealer could have the -1 speed setup with Bronya without using speed boots. When using this setup, most would often use the 134 speed breakpoint. To ensure that the second damage dealer would still act before Bronya on their first turn, make sure that the second damage dealer is around 12 speed behind Bronya. This would be the result. In case 12 speed was not enough, try increasing the speed of your second damage dealer a bit more. Overall, Jade is an extremely powerful AoE damage dealer. Should you try to pull or build Jade if you get the chance? No. Jade is basically the first limited erudition that is forced to fight multiple enemies. For example, Jingyuan and Argenti are somehow compensated when there is only one remaining enemy by allowing their multi-hit attacks to focus its damage, unlike Jade, who always requires multiple enemies to perform well. Also, Jade's usefulness is limited. Her potential is drastically reduced when fighting 1 or 2 enemies. You would want her first Eidolon if you want Jade to be flexible. I did mention that if you were to choose between Jade's first Eidolon or signature light cone, I would suggest going for her first Eidolon. With that said, I will pull for Jade, but stop after getting her signature light cone. I will definitely do my best to try and make her work outside of pure fiction, so watch out for my upcoming Jade showcases. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one.